Okay, so anyone listening to this probably knows that ARD meetings in Texas, well, they can feel a little overwhelming, right?
Absolutely. There's a lot to unpack.
It's a whole new world of acronyms and legalese, and it can be tough to wrap your head around it all. But that's why we're doing this deep dive, to break it all down in a way that makes sense.
We're here to equip you to be the best advocate for your child.
Exactly. We're going to cut through all the jargon and give you the tools and knowledge you need to confidently navigate this whole ARD thing.
And for this deep dive, we're lucky to have the amazing Mary Jenkins as our guide.
Oh, she is fantastic.
With over 25 years of experience working with families and as the founder of Above and Beyond Caring, an organization that supports individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, she really knows her stuff.
Right. And we're going to be pulling from her expertise, along with some other great resources, to really demystify ARD meetings for you.
And, it's important to remember that at the heart of all this, all these ARD discussions, it comes down to your child's individualized education program.
Their IEP.
Right, their IEP. That's really the roadmap for their entire special education journey.
It's more than just paperwork. It's their plan for success.
Exactly.
Which is why those ARD meetings are so important. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's start with the basics for anyone who might be new to this. What exactly is an ARD meeting?
So in a nutshell, an ARD meeting here in Texas, it brings together parents, teachers, administrators, really anyone involved in your child's education. They all come together.
It's a team effort.
To make collaborative decisions about the student's IEP.
I love how Mary emphasizes that the decisions made in that ARD meeting are legally binding here in Texas.
It's serious stuff.
It's not just a casual conversation.
No, not at all.
This is where that saying, knowledge is power, really rings true, right?
100%. Understanding your rights, understanding how this process works, it's absolutely essential.
Absolutely. So let's talk about who's who at these meetings, because it's not just teachers.
Right. It's a whole team.
Can you break down some of those key players and the roles they play in the ARD meeting?
Sure. You'll usually have your child's general education teacher.
Of course.
And they bring their expertise on the regular curriculum and what's happening in the classroom day to day. Then you have the special education teacher, and they're there to focus on your child's specific needs.
Okay, so two different perspectives right there.
Exactly, two sides of the same coin. And then, depending on your child's needs, you might have therapists.
Speech therapists, occupational therapists.
Yeah, speech, occupational, physical, it really runs the gamut.
Wow.
And we can't forget counselors, diagnosticians, and administrators. They might be there too. It's really about bringing a diverse group of experts together to figure out how to best support your child.
That's amazing. Now, I'm curious, when you first started working with ARDs, what surprised you most about the roles? Was there anyone you didn't expect to see at the table?
Honestly, I think it was just the sheer amount of specialized knowledge each person brought. I mean, you have experts in assessment, experts in behavior, curriculum modification, assistive technology.
It's impressive, isn't it?
It's remarkable and a little intimidating at first, honestly.
I can only imagine. And even knowing everyone's role, it's natural for parents to feel a little overwhelmed walking into that meeting for the first time. So let's get into some practical advice for our listeners. Mary Jenkins offers 5 fantastic tips for preparing for your ARD meeting, and I think they really resonate. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. These tips are pure gold, honestly, for any parent.
So let's imagine we have a parent, we'll call her Sarah, who's getting ready for her child's very first ARD meeting. She's probably feeling a little overwhelmed, maybe even a little scared.
Oh, I'm sure. It's a lot to take in.
Exactly. So where does Mary suggest Sarah, or any parent really, begin?
Well, Mary's first tip is all about information. Gather as much as you can. And I don't just mean the school reports, although those are important.
Right.
It's about medical records, any notes from therapists, really anything that helps paint a complete picture of your child.
So, for example, if Sarah's child sees a specialist outside of school, she should make sure to bring those reports to the meeting.
100%.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Don't discount your own observations as a parent.
That's important.
You know your child best.
So true. Okay, so now Sarah has gathered all this information. What's the next step on Mary's list?
Tip number 2 is to go into the meeting with specific goals in mind.
That's a good idea, to have a plan.
Right, think about it. What does Sarah, in this case, want to accomplish during this meeting? It's so easy to get sidetracked, to go off on tangents, and before you know it, the meeting's over, and you haven't even gotten to what you really wanted to address. So having those priorities written down, it helps you stay focused on what truly matters, her child's needs.
Okay, I love that. It's like having a roadmap for the meeting itself. What about tip number 3? What does Mary suggest?
All right, so tip number 3 is all about bringing in reinforcements. Don't be afraid to ask if relevant professionals can attend the meeting with you.
So let's say Sarah's child sees a behavioral therapist outside of school. Could she invite them to the ARD meeting?
Absolutely. That therapist can share valuable insights and advocate for your child's needs from their professional perspective.
Yeah.
Remember, there's power in numbers.
For sure, especially when you're navigating a new and maybe a little intimidating process. All right, tip number 4.
This one is crucial. Take notes.
So important.
Seriously. Write down key points, decisions that are made, really anything you want to remember for later or that you might want to follow up on.
I can see how that would be super helpful if things get heated or if there are any disagreements, you have a record of what was said.
Exactly. And here's a pro tip from my own experience. If you hear a term or acronym you don't understand, jot it down.
That's a good one.
It's so easy to get lost in the jargon, but don't be afraid to ask for clarification.
So true. Okay, last but not least, Mary's 5th and final tip for Sarah as she's prepping for this ARD meeting.
Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Seems simple enough, but sometimes hard to do.
It's easy to feel like you should know all the answers, but you're learning. If something is unclear, ask for clarification. If you need something repeated, just ask. Or if you just need a minute to process everything, just say so.
That's where those notes might come in handy too.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to advocate for yourself in that moment.
It's all about clear communication.
Yes, 100%. You're an equal member of that ARD team, and your voice matters.
I love that. So to recap Mary's 5 awesome tips, gather your information, set clear goals for the meeting, invite any relevant professionals who can support you and your child, take notes, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Great advice for any parent.
Couldn't agree more. And, it's important to remember those decisions made in the ARD meeting. Those are legally binding in Texas.
That's right. We talked about that earlier, but it's definitely worth repeating, which is why understanding those legal rights is so important. So let's dive into that a bit deeper. What do parents need to know before walking into that ARD meeting?
Well, first and foremost, you have the right to participate as an equal member of that ARD committee.
You're an advocate for your child.
Yes. Your input, your perspective, and your experiences with your child are so valuable to that team.
It's a partnership, not a dictatorship.
Exactly. And along those lines, you also have the right to receive proper notice of the meeting.
Okay, so tell me more about that. What does that look like?
You should receive written notice of what the meeting's about, when and where it will be held, and who will be attending.
No last-minute surprises.
Right. You've got enough on your plate as a parent. You don't need any more surprises.
So true. But what if, let's say, the proposed time for the meeting doesn't work with Sarah's schedule? What can she do?
You have every right to request that the meeting be rescheduled to a time that works for everyone.
Oh, that's good to know.
And here's another important one. You have the right to bring an advocate or any experts with you to the meeting.
I imagine that's a big one for a lot of parents.
Definitely. Sometimes you need that extra support, someone to be there with you, someone who maybe speaks the language a little better, someone who really understands the ins and outs of special education law.
Yeah, someone to be your advocate in those moments.
Exactly. And remember, if at any point you're feeling overwhelmed during the meeting, you can always request a break. Take a moment to collect yourself, to process everything, maybe talk things over with your advocate, and then come back to the table when you're ready.
I love that. It's okay to take a pause. Okay, so we've talked about the players, the prep work, and those legal rights as a parent. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of collaboration, because Mary really emphasizes working with the school, not against them. So how can parents like Sarah, our example parent, how can they put that into practice, especially when disagreements are bound to happen?
Absolutely. I think it all boils down to open and respectful communication. And remember, everyone in that room, the parents, the teachers, the specialists, you all share a common goal. You're all there for your child.
That's a good point. We're all on the same team. Now, we keep mentioning the IEP, and we know it's the roadmap for the child's special education journey, but how do we as parents work with the school to ensure that it's more than just a document, that it truly reflects our child's needs and helps them to succeed?
That's where those SMART goals come into play.
SMART goals.
Right. And we want those goals to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And the key here is that crafting these goals should be a truly collaborative effort between you and the school.
So we're not just talking about vague things like improve reading comprehension, but really specific and measurable goals.
Exactly. So instead of that broad statement, a SMART goal might be, by the end of the semester, Sarah's child will be able to read a fourth grade level text and answer comprehension questions with 80% accuracy.
Okay, so we're getting really specific and really measurable, and that makes it easier to track progress and celebrate those successes.
Exactly. And here's the other thing. It's crucial to remember that these goals should be reviewed and updated regularly. What worked last year might not be appropriate for this year. It's all about adapting to your child's growth and changing needs.
I love that. It's an ongoing process. Now, let's face it, disagreements will happen. You're never going to see eye to eye with the school on absolutely everything. And it's natural to feel passionate when it comes to your child and their education. But how can we, as parents, navigate those disagreements constructively and not let our emotions get the better of us?
Again, I think it goes back to communication, active listening, being open to different perspectives, and really a willingness to find that common ground. And remember, you have options when it comes to resolving those disagreements.
Okay, so tell me more about these options. You're talking about dispute resolution, right? But what does that actually look like in the context of an ARD meeting?
It can take many forms. Sometimes it can be as simple as reconvening the ARD committee after everyone's had a chance to gather more information, or maybe just sleep on it.
So take a breath, take a step back, and come back to the table with fresh eyes.
Exactly. And if that doesn't work, there are other options, like a facilitated IEP meeting, where a neutral third party comes in to help guide the conversation.
So almost like a mediator.
Exactly. Someone to help everyone communicate more effectively and work towards a solution together. And if that doesn't work, there's always mediation.
Tell me more about mediation. What does that look like?
So in mediation, you have a trained mediator who works with both parties, the parents and the school, to try to reach a solution that everyone can agree on.
So there are steps in place to address disagreements and hopefully come to a resolution that works for everyone. But what happens if, even after trying all of these things, Sarah still feels like her concerns aren't being addressed, like she's not being heard? What are her options then?
Well, at that point, it might be time to explore more formal options.
More formal in what sense?
Well, in Texas, if those more informal attempts to resolve the disagreement haven't worked, parents have the right to file a formal complaint.
With whom? Who do they file that complaint with?
That would be with the Texas Education Agency. You'll often hear it called TEA.
Okay, TEA, got it. So let's say Sarah, our example parent, she files a formal complaint with TEA and she's still not getting anywhere. What happens then?
Well, if that process doesn't lead to a resolution, parents can request what's called a due process hearing.
Due process hearing. Okay, that sounds kind of intimidating, honestly.
Yeah, it can definitely sound scarier than it is.
So what does it actually entail? What is a due process hearing?
It's essentially a more formal legal proceeding. It's more like a court hearing where both the parents and the school district, they'll present their cases, their sides of the story, before an impartial hearing officer. And that hearing officer ultimately makes a decision based on the evidence and testimony that was presented.
Okay, so it's a big step, not something to jump into lightly.
Definitely not, but it's important for parents to know it's there as an option.
Absolutely. It's a good thing to have in your back pocket if you need it. And that's why I'm so glad we're having this conversation, this deep dive. It's all about giving parents like Sarah the knowledge, the tools, the confidence to navigate this whole process.
Right, because knowledge really is power when it comes to these things.
Yes. We want parents to feel empowered, not intimidated by this process.
Absolutely. And you don't have to be a lawyer or a special education expert to be a powerful advocate for your child.
So true. Now, before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more thing that stood out from our research. Student advocacy.
Oh, so important. And something we don't always talk about. We've talked a lot about parents being advocates, but ultimately we want our kids to be able to advocate for themselves.
Oh, 100%. It's their education, after all. But how do we help them find that voice, especially when they're younger or maybe have communication challenges? Where do we even begin?
Well, I think it starts with involving them in the process as early as possible.
Even with younger kids.
Yeah, even if it's just being present for part of the meeting. Let them see how it works. Introduce them to the team.
Get them familiar with the whole thing.
Exactly. And as they get older, encourage them to share their thoughts, their goals, their concerns. Even if they can't articulate everything perfectly, their perspective is so valuable.
It's all about respecting them as individuals, giving them a voice.
Exactly. And you know, even if they're not ready to lead the conversation in an ARD meeting, you can still coach them on how to talk to their teachers, how to ask for help, how to express their needs.
Those are skills that'll take them far beyond the classroom, too.
Absolutely. Self-advocacy is a life skill.
Couldn't agree more. Well, we've covered so much ground in this deep dive into ARD meetings in Texas. Everything from understanding what an ARD meeting is, who's involved, those crucial preparation tips from Mary Jenkins. We talked about parental rights, the importance of collaboration, setting smart goals, even empowering our children to become self-advocates. Phew, I'm exhausted just thinking about it all.
Me too. It's a lot, but hopefully our listeners are feeling a little more informed, maybe even a little more empowered than when we started.
Right, because knowledge is power. You don't have to be a lawyer or a special education expert to be a fantastic advocate for your child.
Absolutely. Your love, your commitment, your willingness to learn, that's what makes all the difference.
Perfectly said. A huge thank you to Mary Jenkins for sharing her invaluable insights with us. Be sure to check out our show notes for links to her organization and other helpful resources. And thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep being the amazing advocates we know you are.